It's a very, very special bottle for some very special occasions. Let's dive in. Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Bourbon Hutch. Thanks so much for joining me on this journey through the world of whiskey. I know it looks a little bit different today, and that is for good reason. I've got two of my good friends here. We've got Evan on my left, your right, Joe on my right, your left, and they are here to celebrate a couple of awesome occasions with Old Fitzgerald 13-year-old very, very special. This is a bottle that kind of has a legendary status already in the whiskey world. Got dropped this year. It's available only at the Heaven Hill Distillery, or if you were lucky enough to go down to the Bardstown Bourbon Festival, as Joe and I were, you might have gotten the chance to grab one if you got in line. The insane lines at the Heaven Hill booth at the Bourbon Festival. Had to be there very early to do that. But yes, this story with this bottle is kind of crazy. Way back in 1999, Heaven Hill bought up the Old Fitzgerald line. It was 3 years after a massive fire decimated their whole distillery in 1996. They were buying up other brands in order to kind of recuperate, and then they ended up buying Old Fitzgerald. To celebrate 25 years of this brand being under Heaven Hill's umbrella, they've released this bottle. Now, it's only 13 years old, so you might be asking yourself, how did that happen? Well, it was stopped kind of mid-aging process. At 13 years old, they tasted some barrels and thought they were absolutely exceptional, so they kept them in a vat for 12 years, waiting for the right reason to release it. So that is why we have this bottle in front of us. It is a $230 bottle, so not cheap. Joe bought one as well at the festival, so we were both walking away with wallets quite a bit lighter. Hopefully it justifies its price. It's really interesting. I mean, I don't know about you guys, but I've never tasted anything from the 1990s, I don't think. This was actually distilled all the way back then. So it's going to be really cool. The other reason that it's so awesome to get to open it tonight is because we got some awesome friends who have awesome things to celebrate. Joe here, celebrating his 30th birthday.
Ooh.
How does it feel to be old?
Well, like I've been telling everybody, 30 feels great. Feels like I'm just getting started. So, cheers to all of you 90s kids out there. We're going to be drinking some 90s bourbon. So, this is very well played, Stephen.
Oh, well, I'm so happy to have you here. It's great to have you on the channel, and happy 30th, man.
Hey, thank you. Thanks for having me.
And then this guy, Evan, he is about to have his very first child. His wife is due any minute now this week. And what a great occasion to celebrate. How you doing, man?
It's great. I'm excited to taste some bourbon tonight, and maybe I'll sleep better tonight after some whiskey. So.
Yep. And are you afraid that if we get too inebriated and your wife goes into labor, it's going to cause an issue?
Well, I hadn't thought about that. But I would say a first pregnancy, typically they say like 24 hours is going to be the first labor. It's, obviously there are a lot of women who go like 10 to, whatever hours, but it's not an immediate thing usually. So I'll have time to sober up. I'll have time to drag myself back home.
Okay, a little bit of time to
maybe
recuperate.
sleep it off a little bit before. All of that won't be appreciated, but I won't miss the birth.
Okay, that is good to know. Good to know we're not in danger of that. All right, everybody, that is enough prelude. Why don't we open up this bottle, celebrate these guys, and have some great whiskey? Oh, it's pretty in there. That's a big cork. Wow. All right, boys.
So do we have any idea if it was bottled recently or if it's an older?
I think it was bottled recently,
Okay.
yeah. So they would have kept it, stored it, basically in a big metal vat where nothing could change the flavor. And then they would have bottled it like late last year or early this year, something like that. All right, let's give it just a little second to
Let it breathe a little bit.
breathe. Oh my goodness.
Yes.
It's fresh crack, guys, and it smells so good.
Gosh.
I don't think it needs to breathe.
No, I think she's ready.
I think it
to
breathed
go.
for 12 years in that vat. That is the most chewy oak I've ever smelled on a bourbon, potentially.
It comes out at you.
It's got a little, yeah.
It needs a little time. That is what it needs a little time to open up for, is just get some of the ethanol off. But there's very little of it. All right. Let's dive in, boys. What are we getting on the nose? So I said my first impression was that kind of like dense, chewy oak.
Yeah, very similar. Yeah, still getting a lot of that heavy oak on there.
Almost wheat.
It is a wheated bourbon.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah.
Some maple.
Ooh. I can see
you
that.
mentioned that, yeah.
So I'm feeling like there's I don't know if it's a really, really dark black cherry kind of experience, or it might even be leaning in the like date raisin direction for me.
Okay.
Very condensed. It just feels dense to me. The word I keep thinking of is dense. Like that is packing
There's
a wallop.
lot.
All right, let's taste it.
Let's go for it.
Cheers.
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 Cheers, brother. Magnificent.
Yeah, it's beautiful, man. It's really, really good.
To say the least, yeah.
Oh, and it keeps going.
It does. I'm getting almost a wine finish.
Like an oak tannic wine kind of like finish, or like a fruity finish.
Like an old red wine finish.
Yeah.
I can see that.
Yeah, that fruit.
It's got the tannins for sure that just kind of keep going.
Gosh, that's
So
good.
So I'll walk you through what I got and see if you agree with any of this. All right. First kind of initial thing is a wave of like the brown sugar and oak. It really comes in big with the oak. Not too much, not too over oaked, but I don't know. It kind of is almost towing the line for me where it's like, it gives me this feeling of, so this hutch is from the 1950s, and it feels like I walked into a 1950s furniture store. Like the oak is like raw and real.
So potent.
And very potent. And then I get some of that like weeded, maybe it's a red raspberry or black cherry, and then it kind of faded into that oak and caramel, like the tannic, but then it got really caramely for me on the finish, which is great.
Yeah, the nose is as she's opened up. Like you said, furniture store.
But not a modern furniture store where they make it all out of plywood.
Right.
You're walking into an antique store. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Ooh. Almond. Got kind of a creamy almond thing on that sip for me. But I want to hear more. What else are what are you experiencing?
Getting more of the caramel. Yeah, on that one. We had the finish, kind of like Evan was talking about, like a nice dry red wine.
Yeah.
It is a very almost dry bourbon. If you thought about a dry wine, it makes your mouth feel a little bit dry.
Yeah. I think that little strain of caramel I get on the back end helps keep it from going too dry. But I mean, you could argue there's leather, tobacco leaf, and that kind of oak tannic thing on the back end.
Yeah, and that's what I was going to say. I'm getting more of a definitely the oak forward for me, but a little bit of either like loose leaf tobacco or like an old wallet almost.
Yeah, a little bit
that,
of leather.
That leather wallet kind of smell if you translate it into a taste.
Yeah.
So good. And then that wine at the end. It keeps
finish.
going. Like this, the second breath out almost has as much flavor as the bourbon in your mouth.
Yeah.
It's so good.
I'm probably most impressed with this finish. More than anything.
Yeah, I'd agree. That's probably the standout. I see why they stopped it at 13 years. I think if this was in the barrel much longer, it gets too tannic
Yeah, absolutely.
to me. But yeah, to go off your thing about the finish, like, so this is a spectacular bourbon. I think we all agree. Um, the nose is dense and rich. The palate, when you first go in, is brown sugar. That oak really hits you. It's a little bit spicy, but then the wheated kind of characteristics take over too. But I always kind of differentiate a really good bourbon from a truly exceptional one by the finish. And the finish is just what can kind of kick it into that extra gear. And the fact that you could sip on this and then sit for 2 minutes and still be experiencing it, that is the mark of something truly excellent. Like, it just takes it to a whole nother level. One thing I'm really curious from both of you is, like, so a lot of people have compared this bottle to what they call dusty whiskey, which is stuff from the 80s or 90s that was distilled back then, made a little bit differently. The grains were probably slightly different than what they have available today. Like, does it taste different to you than other bourbons you've had in any way that's noticeable?
I would say maybe, I mean, slightly.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if that's where we're getting more of that oak heavy piece of it. So I'm not sure if that there's something there with that.
Oh. What about you? Do you feel like it's a profile you haven't fully experienced before? Just because it's older?
Well, I couldn't have told you before you mentioned this if it was because it was aged that long, or I've had 10 years, but I don't know that I've had, other than maybe the Knob Creek 18 you
Gave you
shared
a
with
little
me
bit,
before.
which is very open to you.
I'm not sure I've had too many things over 10 years old.
Yeah.
But I will say the mouthfeel is different.
Yeah.
And I don't know if that's a characteristic of age or if that's the dusty whiskey.
People talk about that too, about it having a little bit different.
The mouthfeel is different. It's not as heavy, but it almost packs more of a punch in a certain sense. It stays on my my tongue and my cheeks longer.
Yeah.
And I think that helps the finish.
Wow, good insight there. I think to answer my own question for myself, I think the Knob Creek 18 is a good comparison of. That's the most oak I've experienced on something, and this is packing it in 13 years. It does feel just a little bit of a funkiness to the oak. It's not a bad funk,
No.
but it's just like that interesting characteristic that I don't know if I've picked up on something before. Wow. All right, so as we kind of wrap this up, we're all really, really enjoying it, clearly. I'd love to ask you both the question of, like, so what is the best bourbon you've ever had up to this date in your mind, and how does this thing compare to it? Because this is $230. It's basically impossible to get outside of Kentucky. Like, is it holding up to that? So Evan, what's your best bourbon you've ever had, and how does it compare to this one?
I think you shared with me a little bit of the Maker's Mark 2023 cellar aged
I did,
release. That was. I'm not usually a fan of the wheated bourbons on the general scale of them because I like a little bit of a spicier, more tobacco-y kind of bourbon. But that knocked my socks off. It was so good. Not overly sweet, but it has some of that cellar sort of dampness, darkness to it that I like in the more tobacco-y kind of bourbons.
Yeah.
It's the spicier ones. But this has a lot of the same things. I think it's it's an older bourbon. Clearly, I don't know what all went into the aging of it, but 13 years in a barrel and then held for this long.
Yeah.
It's delicious. Whether the dustiness has an impact or not, I don't have enough of a frame of reference to say, but it's a very, very different kind of bourbon than I'm used to. I'd say the cellar aged Makers is probably the closest thing, but this is up there and probably higher in my book.
Wow, nice.
This is so good.
Yeah, it's really, really good.
It is amazing.
Joe, what about you? What's the best thing you've ever had, and how does this compare?
Man, like I'm still thinking. I'm also getting old, as we talked about. I turned 30, so my mind doesn't work as well as it used to.
Which aged better, the bourbon or you?
Oh, that's a good question. But no, thinking back to last year, the Elijah Craig Barrel Proof C923 we actually cracked that open over the weekend, and it was still held true to be one of the top bourbons we tried last year.
Yep.
And
It's also over 13 years, much higher proof, but
right, 133 proof, I believe, on that one. So
Yeah.
obviously a little bit different, but
Kentucky hug.
comparatively speaking, I mean, this one, there is something to it. Like I said, the finish on here is so special that it's obviously going to be probably a little bit better than the C923 on my hierarchy of bourbons. Probably one of the best things that I've tried all year, I will say, for certain.
Yeah, and we were at the festival and we tried a lot of stuff, and there was some great stuff. We didn't get to obviously try this because we bought it but hadn't opened it. Now that we try it, it's right up there. To answer my own question, you're gonna have to wait till the end of the year and see how this does in my end of the year bracket. Okay, so I'm gonna do that myself. I'm gonna do the blind of everything I've really loved this year, and I have a sneaking suspicion that this is going to do well. I think it's a little lower proof, 100 proof, but the profile is so distinct. I think it's going to stand out a ton. All right, guys. I'm 100% in on Old Fitzgerald 13 being a really special one. Glad they gave it the name very, very special. It's worth that $230, I think. It's just especially the story and the bottle that you get. So it's been a pleasure, gents. Thanks for joining me for it. Congrats to both of you for surviving 30 years.
Amen.
Hopefully your child survives at least 30 years under your care. And
We'll see.
I'll just accept it if she looks okay.
Yeah. We're really excited for you, man. It's going to be awesome.
Congratulations.
All right. Thanks, everybody. Until we see you guys for another video, all we can say is keep drinking good whiskey and cheers.
Cheers.
Cheers.